So Peter, you being here 45 years, leading the church from a small church to a large church.
Yes.
And we're so grateful to God for all he's done through you. But so many men, you must have seen it, find it hard to come towards the end of their formal ministry. What made you begin to think of coming to the end of your formal ministry, having had such a blessed ministry? What was going through your mind?
Well, strangely enough, I never had any problems with this. In point of fact, I never had a day's withdrawal symptoms after I retired.
Yes.
The weekend I retired. It was like the closing of a chapter, the turning of a page.
Yes.
And I felt God was saying, right, son, it's over to those now. You just walk with me and be a good boy.
Yeah.
And I delighted in the succession.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed my retirement. I was able to continue unabated my biblical and theological studies, which I still do, because from the neck up, I'm like I always was. Just from the neck down, I've had a bit of trouble. And I contemplated this carefully, of course, as it was coming on the horizon. One friend I remember suggested when I was in my late 50s that I might start to talk about retirement. And I said, no, it's too early. It will lead to a kind of lame duck pastorate and start a degree of restlessness among people. It's too soon. And we were in the middle of some very big programs and eventually building this place.
Yes.
But about 3 years, exactly just 3 years before my retirement, 2012, I think it was, I brought to the eldership a 1,000-word paper on retirement and outlined my thoughts of its opportunities and dangers and the routes we might go. And there was a lot of discussion on this.
Yeah.
And then the fruits of that were brought to the church meeting a few months later, and we were told, now over the next year, you'll be hearing us talk more and more about this. And we had a week of prayer as a church for each member of the team, and so forth. And then during that year, late in that year, we had a much closer inspection of John and Pete and the future. And then at the end of that year, I think 2013, I think it was, we had a major church response to the elders' recommendations. So that was 3 years before that we started the process, 2 years before that we published the process and had the church's response, its vote. And then 1 year before, it enabled me to say to John and Pete, two of our outstanding preachers, as well as John being by then named as my successor, we altered the public face, as it were, of the church so that people would get used to this. And I went to the small evening meeting. John and also Pete preached in the mornings
in the
for much
meeting.
of that year. So that the church as a whole got used to my absence and their presence.
What made you think of that? You know, not just those 3 years, but before that, you're thinking, because some leaders do not want to even think about stepping out of ministry, do they? You must have seen men who just put that day off all the time till they either die in harness or you must have seen it go badly wrong. What made you?
Yes.
Tell me some of the things that sort of the negative side of what you've seen.
Well, you can learn by the negatives. You learn by your own mistakes, but it's less painful to learn by other people's mistakes. And one tries to do that. I remember years ago in London talking to a youngish man. He wasn't very young, who had succeeded someone who'd been in place for many years up country. And I said, how are you getting on after so-and-so? He said, it's awful, he said. I can't get a new idea past the church meeting. He's up on his feet, waving his finger in the air. All the old people vote with him, and I can't move. Now, I've no patience with people like that. It's disgraceful. We spent our lives preaching challenge, surrender, and grace. And to have a man at the end of his career who is unwilling to face the challenge and shows little of the grace, whom you daren't have in the church after because of the trouble he might cause, there's no excuse at all.
No.
It seems to me that it's a ministerial sin and ought to be addressed that way. But so often ministers don't have accountability, you see.
No, they're their own
rules. They need
rulers.
to have it.
Do you think some men, although they formally retire, deep down in their hearts, they still want to be the leader? Is that what goes on, do you think, when someone still acts as if they're the leader when they've stepped down?
It's indefensible, isn't it? It's like the indissolubility of holy orders. They should have become Roman Catholics. They could have stayed in the monastery for years.
That's one weakness. What else do you think goes on inside men who find it hard to face up to retirement, who have no plan, who don't give it, perhaps they...
There's fear.
Yes.
There's insecurity.
Yes.
And there's a confusion between yourself and your role.
Yes.
So that you end up somewhere between superego and lacking in self-worth, I don't know which, from one extreme to the other. But they don't detach themselves from their role.
No.
And we must.
Yes.
I mean, that's what prayer is about.
Yes.
You don't address God as if he was a public meeting.
No.
You pray with all the vulnerability of a sinner.
Yes.
And all the need of a child.
Yes, that's
And
great.
then with the responsibilities of a pastor and carer. But that's a trust. A trust is not a present, not a gift.
No.
It's not signing over.
No.
They are God's people, God's church.
Yeah, that's very helpful, isn't it? I remember somebody saying to me, we're all interim pastors. There's only one great shepherd of the sheep.
Yeah, it's true.
We're interim.
Yeah.
And as soon as we recognise that we may be interim, as you've been for 45 years, but it goes fast.
Yeah.
And we have to think of passing on that baton way. I mean, that's when the relay always goes wrong, isn't it?
I tell you what I said to our church, because I've always been a public man, and it's just natural to me. But I remember saying quite early in the process, and they roared with laughter, I said, now remember, you won't have any trouble with me. I will go on a long holiday, I'll come back. If I find you rolling down the aisles and swinging on the chandeliers, you pick up the tab. Okay. And if I find you wearing knee silk breeches and Banner of Truth books under your arm, you pick up the tab. Okay. You'll get no criticisms from me, only prayer and blessing.
Yes.
Well, I'm very glad to say everybody roared, but it was a very balanced church and leadership.
That's great.
And it's that confidence which, of course, undergirds you.
Yeah.
And if you've got poor leaders that you can't trust, it's your own fault for putting them in place or not diluting them with stronger, better leaders.
Yes.
I do realize that many churches struggle with leadership because of sheer numbers. They are in a part of the country where you have very little choice.
No.
And so that is much, much harder than those of us who are in city churches awash with a lot of talent.
Yes. So the fact that you had undergot a leadership team was a very big step forward in the first place, wasn't it? And that helped you coming towards retirement. You'd already been working as a team anyway.
Yes, very much so.
In that sense, senior leaders need to know how to work teams way before they retire.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about how... John, tell us about your involvement before you ever stepped up into Peter's role, working in a team.
Yeah, I came to Nottingham and to Cornerstone in 1999. My first Sunday in Nottingham as a student, I came to Cornerstone with some members of my wider family who are part of the church and still are. And so then I joined the full-time staff team as a minister in training in 2007. So I was already part of the senior staff team, and later on became an elder and a minister as well before becoming the lead minister. And I think as that's that model of team leadership and being part of a team, visibly part of a team. So while Peter was very much the senior minister, he was keen that other people led appropriately and had real responsibility and were seen to have real responsibility as well, and were trusted by other leaders, trusted by the church. And as that culture developed over a number of years and became the norm, I think that really helped us to have a number of different significant transitions. Actually, we transitioned from in location from a secondary school that we hired to our own premises, our own facilities, which was a major transition, and then a transition of leadership as well. Both of which went remarkably smoothly.
Yeah, great.
And the Lord was very
So
generous.
a lot of it was down, humanly speaking, but Pete, to your confidence in God's provision and generosity of spirit, because you must have seen senior leaders, they don't mind having people working for them, but they don't like sharing the real business, do they? They don't really hand over significant responsibilities till too late. But how did you learn to do that? Was that something you'd seen modelled, or had you reflected on it?
Well, I had certain natural advantages.
Yes.
One of the main being my own incompetence.
So you knew what you weren't good at as well as what... Yes, so. That's really important, isn't
it? And if I forgot it, Valerie, my wife, was always there to remind me.
Yes, good. Yeah.
And everybody else might be far too polite. But no, I was in respect with great respect, I looked at the gifting of both John and Pete, John Russell and Peter Brown.
Yes.
Peter is the leader of our church plant.
Yes.
We sent 80 adults and 40 children off. It's about 130, 40 now. And both of them, highly talented, very gifted men, but deeply aware of the ethos of the church, how it ticked. And really part of that, not a foreign body in the bloodstream of the church.
No, that's very important, isn't it?
Not someone who is desperate to pull it in a different direction.
No.
Nor, on the other hand, rigidly determined to relive the past.
No, yeah.
Two of the dangers.
Yes. So how did you feel handing over to a significantly younger man? Without saying, John, we have both got the same hair colour. We've got a bald patch on top.
I'll get there, I'm sure.
Well, one day. But I mean, for many men, they only want to hand on to somebody a little bit younger.
Oh no, I didn't think like that.
You realised that you had to sort of almost jump a generation?
Well, yes, and there's a reason for that. And John knows, and he's probably thinking of it. Come to think of it now, I grew up in a church in Wales where there were three ministries. One of 33 years, one of 25 years, and another of 33 years. So I've always thought in terms of long pastorates, and known their worth, and their legacy down through the generations.
Yes.
And we've talked of some of the pitfalls, of course, but I'm not thinking of those at the moment. I'm thinking
the
of
benefits,
of the other. And I didn't want a church that would go through all the challenges of this kind of change, only to have to redo it 5 years down the road, without perhaps the help that they had at an earlier stage.
Yes, yeah.
So I was very, very aware that both John and Pete, John particularly here now, when this process was reaching its close, that they were in for the long haul. That they weren't riding a career.
No.
Churches sometimes look for stars. Well, the trouble with stars is that they become wandering stars, and you don't know where they're going to be in 5 years, because they're following a career trajectory. John certainly has the advantage that I had, being in a city with 2 universities. We have so much change happening around us, as much as you could possibly wish.
Yes.
But at the same time, John isn't fixated on one thing or one group of people. His leadership and pastoral role is right across a church of a very considerable diversity in age and background and identity and so forth. But nevertheless, it's a city humming with life.
Yes. Yeah.
And that helps. But no, I didn't have any trouble with the fact that John was much younger. He was in his 30s, which I thought he was mature, very able. He'd been tried and proven as leader of all the house group leaders, for instance. That was a good test.
Yes.
And he would collect them for a major meeting every so often in the year. And they were very significant people in our church. So there was this young chap leading all these other people and doing it very well. So that all helped me to have great confidence.
Yes.
But I certainly wouldn't have wanted someone who was just a few years younger. I had my eyes on a long, rich pastorate.
Yes, that's right.
And it was our responsibility to choose the right man.
Yeah, that's great, because that's that lovely thing about 2 Timothy, isn't it? Paul, I've handed over to you, Timothy. He's going to hand on to somebody else who's going to hand on to others. He's going way beyond his own lifetime.
Yes.
Whereas too many of us, our horizon is a few years, whereas you're actually looking way beyond that.
One of the things we did when we built the Cornerstone building, and we had to do that, we'd grown to 700 in the school, and the school told us we had to leave.
Yes.
We had no choice.
No.
We also had no money because we'd given all our money to missions overseas and home.
Yeah.
And so there were enormous prayer meetings and sacrifice involved.
Yes.
Our people ended up giving 5 million.
Yes.
And that's in a church where in those days 100 and odd were students, and 80 would have been refugees, 150 would have been children.
Yeah.
None of them have money.
No.
So it was down to about 350 or so people
Yes.
to give as they never gave before.
Yeah.
But one of our mottos was, we are building for 100 years.
Yes. Yes,
We are
that's
building for 100 years of Bible ministry in this city.
great. Yeah.
We all say gospel ministry, but if you don't have the Bible centered, you soon lose the gospel. The gospel we have is from the Bible.
Yes. Yes.
So you have to have a church which
Strong-
is Bible
strong on the
centered,
Bible. Yeah.
strong on expository and other teaching.
Yeah.
And we try to focus the church and its giving on 100 years through generations.
Yeah.
Because people were being asked to sacrifice enormous amounts.
Yes. Yeah. That's so in that sense, they're giving for their grandchildren and beyond benefit.
Oh, very much so. That's exactly true.
Yes, that's great. And you'd modelled that by handing on to John.
Right.
You'd modelled, you were talking about the money, but in terms of your own ministry, you were handing it on. John, how did you feel having this big thing handed over? People say, Peter's got big shoes to fill.
Yes.
I mean, God had hugely blessed the ministry.
Yeah.
How did you feel, not just working with Peter, but taking over from Peter? Yeah. How does that feel?
And people will ask me, what was it like taking over from Peter Lewis? His big shoes to fill. And yes, of course, that's the sense. But I can only really describe a very deep sense of calling.
Yes.
Probably deeper than anything I've ever felt about calling in anything else. A deep sense of calling, that this is what the Lord has equipped me for.
Yeah.
And prepared me for this role at this church at this time. And one of the things that really blesses me is that Peter wasn't looking for someone to be exactly like him and lead like he led, teach like he taught. Peter and I both have leadership and teaching gifts. We're both leaders, we're both preachers. But the way that that's expressed is different.
Yes.
And Peter led and taught the church for 45 years, and he was the right person to lead us through all of those decades, and particularly to lead us through the building project. And I have a strong sense of calling that's affirmed by the church and by Peter, that I don't need to try and be a mini Peter, because I would just do it badly.
Yeah, that's
God has created me the way He's created me,
Yeah.
and gifted me with my strengths and also the different weaknesses that I have to Peter. But that brings in the importance of, there's a team around, there's a leadership team, a much wider staff team, and other leaders within the church. And that's the way that God's designed it.
No, that's very well. Similarly at home, we're similarly. I'm transitioning to a younger guy again, like you, a lot younger. Came in, he was 32, I think, when he came.
Right.
And we missed a generation. For exactly the same reasons.
Yes.
I felt that a long ministry was massively helpful for everybody, the whole church, the town, my family. It was great to have that continuity. And but the young guy, Martin, he said to me, "Oh, I'm not like you." I said, "Well, that's really good you're not like me, because you don't have to be me.
No.
You have got gifts to take the church forward that I have not got.
Yes.
And you don't have to be me. And then you staff, as it were, somewhat around your weaknesses too." Pete, tell me a little bit more about the team. Why do you think so many senior leaders find it hard working with a staff? You've seen great men of God whose ministry, his preaching ministry, has been hugely blessed. But behind that, they haven't got that strength of teamwork. Why do you think that may be sometimes?
Oh my.
Because you've worked hard. I mean, John and Pete are a testimony He's not just your only assistant, is he? You've had you've worked for years with others and brought their ministries on and released them into kingdom work.
It's mainly a matter of goodwill on all sides, I think. I used to say
Yes.
30 years ago, this church runs on goodwill.
Yes.
And that can't be minimized, because it's very important in a church
Yes.
that people are aware of one another's characters and abilities and needs and so forth and so forth. I was very aware of John's gifts as being much wider than my own. My own gifts are very much public and in preaching, and also at a pastoral level.
Yes. Yeah.
Often with serious pastoral matters that demanded an experienced person. But John's gifting was far wider than my own. He's a very good preacher, and I often come up to him after, that was excellent this morning.
That's lovely.
It's very important. But not only that, he's an excellent manager too. Across the board.
Yes.
He can gather, consolidate, move on. He can spot leadership. He can develop it. He can introduce new forms of service to the church. So he's more widely gifted than I was. He used to say I ran a big church as if it was a small church.
Yeah.
And this was because for so many years I was really in a very traditional mode.
Yes.
Because I am, despite what I've said, fairly attached to the past,
Yes. Yeah.
the traditions and so forth.
Yeah.
And one needs to move on from that.
Yeah.
And to recognize someone's gifting, especially where it exceeds one's own, even if they are not developed to the point of your particular excellence, it may be that the totality of their giftings and their preaching, teaching ministry, and I'm not thinking of John now, but of anybody, all add up to something very good for the future of the church.
That's terrific. Yeah, that's
If
great.
a church is getting good, competent preaching, teaching from the scriptures, well applied to the lives of the people, they don't have to look for some star. It's been a big mistake in some churches.
Yes.
They want it all singing, all dancing, and whatever. You know?
Yeah.
So seeing John's gifts was always very salutary for me, and it was one of the reasons I was so relaxed in my retirement.
Yeah.
I sit at the back. I love every service that I go to.
Great.
Valerie and I come walking down in the morning. We like to walk to church. And you see all these groups coming up and down different routes. And it reminds me of the Old Testament believers when the feasts were on, filling the roads of Galilee and Judea, you know. And it is a lovely feeling.
Yeah, it's terrific.
But to know that you're going to have a service which is excellently run by different people, and then John or one of the others will come on and preach, and you know it will be a good sermon.
Yeah.
But all the other parts have been good too.
Good as well, yes.
Because the people there think about what they're going to do.
No, that's good.
And work through it.
I remember saying at home, where you've just modelled that so often senior leaders, their default mode is to keep defending the past. And they're critical of the future, whereas actually it needs to be the other way around.
Oh, yes.
That you need to cheer on the future, whatever it is. You need to just encourage, and let the younger guy to defend the past. He can defend your record, can't he? He can say, "God bless Peter," but you don't have to. And you say this: the importance of your role is just to bless all that God is doing in the future. Whereas I've seen men who do get worried about any change. They feel threatened by it. They feel that the whole church is going to go down this long, slippery slope that is in their heads more than anywhere else, isn't it? Whereas, as you say, you've just come. It sounds to me you delight in coming to the church you used to lead to worship God here.
Oh, amen. Very much so. And in point of fact, I knew a church which had 2 retired ministers in its congregation. And I was talking to one man some years ago who had one of the most famous theologians in the world in his congregation, brain the size of a planet. And he said, he's marvelous to have. He's the humblest man you could wish.
Great.
And he's a delight to preach to. So appreciative. And I used to say to John And Pete and the others at the team meetings, I said, look, you can put it on my gravestone. He was no trouble to anybody.
Oh, that's lovely. Yes. Well, that's the mindset you have to have, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Tell me a bit more about retirement. You said you're enjoying it. How did you transition from a busy life where so much is in your schedule through to your time's your own? You know, apart from wanting to be at church, you know, you don't have to be at any particular place.
No,
How have you made that transition in your own lifestyle?
I didn't find it very difficult. My wife Valerie used to laugh and used to say, "Nothing's changed. He's doing what he always did. He's been reading for 40 odd years.
So you've maintained the reading habit."
She said to me once, I was reading a major book by N.T. Wright. He had done a series, you see, of his main theological works. And there's about 4 or 5 volumes, and I was on the 5th, which is on Paul and the Faithfulness of God, I think. It's a major work, and very challenging, because you don't always agree with things, you see. It's very challenging. And I remember Valerie saying to me, she said, "Why are you putting yourself through this?" she said. "To what purpose are you struggling with this?" And I looked at her, and I found myself saying, "To what purpose do you climb in the Alps?" I said, "This is my kleiner Scheidegger."
Yes, yes.
I am wrestling with one of the finest minds in the theological world, a major work dealing with other major works, and it's like a range of mountains all around.
Yes.
And he's showing me the peaks.
That's very important, isn't it?
It's a delight.
That's very helpful, isn't it? I read a book recently, it's called Emotionally Healthy Leadership. And the very last chapter is on endings and beginnings.
Oh, yes.
And what he argues is that retirement is the closing of a chapter, but it's not the end of the story.
True.
You're opening up other things. And for you, you know, still that delight in learning.
Yes, very much so.
That it isn't just, I wasn't just reading for my job, I was doing it to know God better too.
Oh, amen.
That's very important for you, isn't it?
That's it, you see. That's the guiding star of all ministry is the presence of God and the worship of God, the honor of God, the word of God. And you have to come out of all your studies with that.
Yes.
And you take it into the pulpit or platform, whatever. And it's there from the beginning of the service on. I always started a service with prayer. And I used to describe it as doxological prayer. We had a visit once from someone who later joined us, and he came from another part of the British Isles, I won't say which, where it wasn't the way. And in your opening prayer, you know, you did the worthless worm thing.
Yeah.
And you crawled into the presence chamber and you crawled back out again. And by the time you finished, everybody felt like death.
Yes.
And the first songs were killed.
Yes, sort of funeral dirge, really.
And how does the Lord's Prayer begin? It doesn't begin, "Forgive us our trespasses." It begins, "Our Father in heaven." And so you start a service doxologically by praising God. And I was training one man who was a very fine mind, a lawyer, a lecturer in law, highly placed. And I tried to tell him about this. So the first time he opened in prayer, it was, "Oh Lord, we glorify you. Oh Lord, we praise you. Oh Lord, we glorify you. Oh Lord, we praise you." I said, no, that's not the way to do it. You tell him what he's like.
Yes.
You go through the attributes of God and you glorify him in his goodness and his patience and all the other attributes. And once he got it, he could climb on it. Because there is nothing more wonderful than God.
No.
And what makes God wonderful is his attributes. And what makes the service special is his people celebrating his attributes.